Welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving straight into one of the most volatile geopolitical standoffs happening in the world right now, the high-stakes gridlock between the US, Iran, and Israel. We are going to cut through all the background noise to map out the exact demands, the leaked memos, and the direct quotes from leaders. We really need to understand why this diplomatic jam is so incredibly tough to break, and maybe more importantly, what it actually means for your wallet.
To get a sense of exactly where things stand right this second, look at the immediate catalyst. The communication lately has become unbelievably blunt. Donald Trump recently took to Truth Social and posted this: "I have just read the response from Iran's so-called representatives. I don't like it. Totally unacceptable." This isn't some quiet back-channel diplomacy, right? This is a very public, absolute rejection of Iran's latest proposal to end the war. That single post essentially froze whatever momentum these negotiations might have had, and it perfectly sets the stage for the massive gap between the two sides that we're about to explore.
So here is our roadmap for today. We'll look at the fragile ceasefire, the U.S. 14-point memo, Iran's counterproposal, Israel's nuclear red line, and finally the blockades and oil prices.
Let's start with Part 1, the fragile ceasefire, and a tense pause in the February conflict.
Before we really get into the diplomacy, we have to understand the actual reality on the ground. This specific phase of the conflict was launched back in February by the US and Israel. Fast forward to right now, and we are in what can only be described as a highly tense holding pattern. There is a ceasefire currently in place, and it's largely being observed to facilitate the very talks that are currently stumbling. But it's absolutely crucial to note that this is not total peace. Occasional exchanges of fire are still happening. The whole situation is resting on a knife's edge. In fact, this ceasefire is looking increasingly unstable, and that diplomatic window, it could snap shut at any moment if those occasional exchanges escalate.
Now, amidst this incredibly fragile situation, we have to weigh the political expectations that are being set. Just earlier this week, Donald Trump repeated a prediction he's made before, stating flat out that the war in Iran will be over quickly. So the key takeaway here is the stark contrast. You have a very confident prediction of a swift resolution coming from the US side, juxtaposed against a reality on the ground where even a temporary pause is punctuated by gunfire, and, as we're about to see, the diplomatic demands from everyone involved are literally miles apart. That brings us to Part 2, the US 14-point memo and the leaked demands coming out of Washington. So what exactly is the US asking for? Well, according to reporting by Axios, the American negotiating position was laid out in a one-page 14-point memo. Axios cited unnamed U.S. officials and sources briefed on the matter. Let's look at the key provisions they leaked. Number 1, a suspension of Iranian nuclear enrichment. 2, in exchange for that, the lifting of certain sanctions. And 3, restoring free transit through the Strait of Hormuz. But here's the really important part. Sources emphasize that these terms are a package deal. They are entirely contingent on a final comprehensive agreement being reached. It's not an a la carte menu where you can just pick and choose. It's an all-or-nothing proposition from Washington.
Moving right along to Part 3, Iran's counterproposal and Tehran's demands sent via Pakistan.
Okay, this is the absolute heart of the current crisis. The U.S. demands a suspension of nuclear enrichment and an open Strait of Hormuz. But Iran's counterproposal, which was reported by the semi-official Tasnim news agency and routed through Pakistan, demands an immediate end to the war on all fronts, a halt to the U.S. naval blockade, and absolute guarantees of no further attacks. You can see right away why Trump called this response unacceptable. The U.S. wants strategic concessions on nuclear capabilities and shipping lanes before finalizing any agreement. Meanwhile, Iran wants an immediate end to all military and economic pressure first. They are completely, fundamentally misaligned on how to even begin the sequencing of peace.
And if you're wondering if there is any wiggle room at all on the Iranian side, we just have to look at the domestic messaging coming straight out of Tehran. On Sunday, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian gave an address. Now, while he didn't explicitly name the proposal sent through Pakistan, his tone was unmistakable. He said, "We will never bow our heads before the enemy, and if talk of dialogue or negotiation arises, it does not mean surrender or retreat." This kind of rhetoric is absolutely crucial for understanding the psychology at play here. For Iran, any concession that looks even slightly like retreating under military pressure is viewed as a total non-starter. This unyielding public stance makes diplomatic compromise incredibly tough for their negotiators to pull off. Let's move to Part 4, Israel's nuclear red line. Because even if the US and Iran were to magically agree tomorrow, we still have a third stakeholder's firm condition to consider. Remember, the war we are talking about was launched in February by the US and Israel. And Israel has its own incredibly strict parameters for what actually constitutes an end to the conflict. In an excerpt from an interview due to air on CBS's 60 Minutes, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu made his position crystal clear regarding Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium. He said there's still enrichment sites that have to be dismantled. The Israeli position is that this uranium stockpile must be completely taken out before they even consider the war to be over. Pay close attention to the language there. The leaked U.S. memo talked about a suspension of enrichment. Netanyahu is demanding the actual dismantling of the sites. That is a massive difference in objective, and it adds a whole new layer of complexity to these already gridlocked negotiations. Finally, let's turn to Part 5, blockades and oil prices. This is where we see how this entire geopolitical standoff directly impacts the rest of the globe and why this actually matters to everyday people living thousands of miles away from the Middle East.
As part of their leverage in this conflict, Iran has targeted one of the most important pieces of real estate on the planet, the Strait of Hormuz. This is a critical maritime choke point for the world's oil supply, and the cause and effect of Iran blocking this strait is undeniable. Global markets are currently being completely rattled. Oil has recently climbed above $100 a barrel due to these escalation fears, and analysts are directly linking these ongoing tensions to U.S. inflation hitting 3.8% in April. It's pretty simple. When the flow of global energy is threatened, literally everything gets more expensive. So what we have right now is both sides essentially using global economics as a weapon in a battle of dueling blockades. On the U.S. side, a strict naval blockade of Iranian ports aims to exert maximum economic pressure to force an agreement on that 14-point memo. In parallel retaliation, Iran continues to squeeze the global economy by blocking the Strait of Hormuz. The U.S. squeezes Iran's economy, Iran squeezes the global economy. It is a massive, incredibly high-stakes game of economic chicken playing out right now on the high seas.
Which brings us to the ultimate question. You've got the U.S. demanding nuclear suspension, Iran demanding an immediate end to the war, and Israel demanding the total dismantling of enrichment sites. Add to that the dueling blockades that are actively driving up inflation and oil prices globally. So how long can the world economy actually withstand this stalled ceasefire before something breaks? Because based on the leader's own words, nobody's willing to budge an inch. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep your eyes on those shipping lanes, and as always, keep questioning the headlines.